Okay, we're going to go through asexual reproduction, this little Prezi, and you have your note sheets that you need to fill out as you're going along with this. Your note sheet is actually in the form of a Google slide presentation. So uh, you can complete your notes as you're listening to me, or you will have access to the Prezi that I'm going over, and you can look at it as many times as you would like or that you need to. So, asexual reproduction is reproduction that does not involve two parents. And we're going to look at some advantages and disadvantages. But first, how would we define this? Asexual reproduction occurs when one parent creates a genetically exact copy of itself. Now, it may also be known as a clone, but when we get to genetic engineering, we'll see that cloning um, is probably better used in terms of making an identical cell uh, in genetic engineering. But asexual reproduction is one parent that creates a exact copy or an exact copy of itself. Next, I'll go to advantages. So there are three advantages listed here for asexual reproduction or organisms that reproduce this way. Well, you only need one parent. So there's no looking for a mate. So that's not a problem. You can produce more offspring quickly, and it is a very simple process. So there's no complications here really to go wrong. Disadvantages. Sorry guys, technical difficulties. So the disadvantages, there's no genetic variation. And one thing that we'll see as the year goes along that genetic variations are essential to survival of a species. So variations could be differences in the way that organisms move, or the way that they eat, or what they can eat, or what color they are, what type of fur they have. All of those are variations. You're not going to get that genetic variation in asexual reproduction. Bad characteristics, if there are any, are going to be passed on. And it is difficult for organisms to adapt as time goes along. So I'm just going to pop through these really quickly. So budding, and this is an example that I had there on the main slide. Budding occurs when a second organism develops from an outgrowth of the original. So here we have a hydra, and you may have seen some of those if you've ever gone to the aquarium. And occasionally you might find a little teeny weeny one. And that little tiny version of a hydra is an exact copy that was made from a budding of the original. Same thing will happen with yeast, except for you won't be able to see that happening because they're microscopic. Then we'll go to fragmentation. So fragmentation, and we see this with these flatworms. So we're talking about a group of worms called platyhelminthes. So they're flat. Platy means flat. These are planaria. And the planaria, we can see that we can cut them and that they will regenerate a portion of whatever fragment that they were cut from. So fragmentation, of fragment or a piece of an organism develops into a fully grown copy. Same thing that you see with starfish. Vegetative propagation, and you see this with strawberries is a really good example of this, that some plants can send out what are called runners, and each of these runners will develop into a new daughter plant. So it'll develop into a new plant that will be identical to the parent. Then we have fission, or sometimes referred to as binary fission. And fission is a type of cell division where the cell develops into two copies. So usually when you're talking about binary fission, you're probably talking about either bacteria or protists like amoebas. Now, bacteria, and one of the reasons why that they evolve or seem to evolve more quickly than other organisms is because of the way that they reproduce. It's asexual. It doesn't take a lot amount of time, so they can go through several generations in no time at all. But basically, they grow, and we're going to see as the year goes along that when it comes to cell size, no matter if you're something as simple as a bacterium, or if you're more complicated like us, cells are limited by what's called surface area to volume ratio, and that limits their cell size. So at a certain point, any cell is going to get to the divide or die point. So when they get so big, it's divide or die. Then they copy their DNA, which that's the instruction manual, and then they split. That's it. Spores, and you've probably heard of spores. Some organisms, such as fungi, release spores, which are tiny balls of cells that can grow into new organisms. So you may have uh, sorry, I heard something outside distracted me. You may have heard the old adage that one bad apple will spoil the batch. Well, it's kind of sort of true. If you think about fungus that's on an apple and it reproduces by spores, and those spores are going to be airborne, then they're probably going to get on to the other apples, and those apples will also have fungal growth. Yuck. Parthenogenesis. Now, parthenogenesis sounds science fiction. In extremely rare cases, some animals are capable of producing offspring without mating. So you can see this in snakes, you can see this in certain type of fish. I read an article sometime this summer, and it was about sturgeon and some other type of fish, and they were trying to create some hybrid. And in this process, they whatever they were doing, the pressures that they were putting onto these fish, that they actually forced some of them to go through parthenogenesis. Crazy, but true. So again, you could have completed your notes as we were going through this together, or you have access to this same Prezi, and you can just click on these, go back to them, use the arrows, and then complete your notes.